Yeah, one thing that we always say is like, just because it's old doesn't mean it's good as well. There's a lot of bad old stuff. You know, just like it could even be from the 50s, but it could be terrible.
We've come down to Sheffield to Jojo's Rag Parade to do some digging for vintage clothes, looking for a bit of inspiration and to have a chat with the man himself about what counts as good quality vintage clothing.
Pablo Picasso came to Sheffield in 1950. Not in the 50s, in 50 exactly.
Yeah.
And he spoke at a World Peace Conference in Sheffield, which sounds made up, it's totally true. He drew a picture of a dove and he gave it to a young Brian Blessed.
Oh, really? I guess
Brian Blessed was like, you're not Picasso, I don't believe this. Screwed up the drawing, right. Chucked it on the floor, and I think someone later went and picked it up and was like, oh my God, and I think they had it framed in like I think it was a barber's in town or something. And we did a T-shirt and it was NWA font that said Rag Parade, and then it was Brian Blessed, but an old guy eating a Picasso drawing of a dove. And me and Dan thought it was genius. It didn't sell very well.
Nobody liked it.
Yeah, and then even giving them away was difficult, like because people were like, I don't know if I really want to wear a massive.
Big collectible now, though, weren't they?
Yeah, the Brian Blessed.
People be on eBay.
T-shirts.
People bidding against each other.
What qualities does a garment have to have?
That will mean it ends up in a quality vintage shop.
Yeah, it starts for me usually with the fabric. I think if the fabric's good, then it usually withstands that test. The fabric is really important. Obviously, the construction as well is very important. But if the fabric's no good, it doesn't even matter how well it's made. It's still it's not gonna age well. Like when you look in second-hand shops or in like or wherever you look for a load of old clothes, a charity shop, a rag house, anywhere, you look at stuff. You look at stuff that was made really cheaply in the 80s, or it could have been made in the 60s. Really like that was cheaply made, whatever era. It's just like it's not aged well.
And what are people buying at the moment?
Outerwear is solid because it doesn't have to quite fit perfect. Something can be a little bit big or a little bit small. You can kind of make it work. Whereas everything else, trousers, shirts, it's a bit more of a specific, audience.
Layering pieces.
Yeah, shoes definitely.
Shoes.
Yeah, I never got on well with them size 6s.
And what about British vintage?
Yeah.
Compared with American or the rest of European, what's the kind of feel for that?
I really like British vintage stuff because it's niche. Like when you look at like America, they had, it's a much bigger country, and they were like, for example, sportswear in America. Think how many sports teams there were in America and how many different sports. Whereas like, we were just kind of a load of old scrubbers, playing in an old sweatshirt. So we're a much smaller country and there's much less British stuff, but the stuff is still really good and really iconic and becoming popular worldwide, I think, because the British style is very iconic. You look at like, one of the greatest of all times, Ralph, he referenced a lot of British stuff because he was obsessed with that British style. So even when he did Americana, he worked British stuff in there somehow, with the boating blazers, the school blazers, the preppy stuff. He liked that British look. There's always a bit of British influence even in like the best Americans' work. So I think British stuff is coming back, and it's become quite popular, but it's just so hard to find. You don't see much of it, not good stuff.
And you've got stuff in here from the 90s, from 2000s up to like really now. And what do you look for in those things?
Again, probably the same sort of basis, and I think those things like looking at how it's made and the quality, and like the fabric. And I think a lot of that stuff is really good, even up into stuff that was made last year, just because it's modern also as well. It goes the same, doesn't mean it's rubbish because it's modern. There's loads of amazing modern gear. And I think what we like to offer in here is a service where we can sell someone something that would have been really expensive new. They might not be able to afford it. We can sell them a second-hand version for a lot less. And I think the thought process on buying that item is a lot quicker than buying a vintage item. For say, if someone has to buy like a vintage flight jacket from World War II, they've got to think, all right, why does it fit a bit weird? Why is it falling to bits? Why has it got a hole in it? They've got to understand, the value of it. Why is the price so high? They've got to understand all these things. Whereas the thought process on buying something that, all right, just try this on. Oh, I know these are 800 quid now. He's selling it second hand for 300 or 250. That's quite a beautiful thing. And when they do get sick of it, they'll probably get the money back or there or thereabouts. So it's a nice like circular way of shopping, and I think that's the way that young people are shopping in the UK now, which is really good. It's caught on. People are buying stuff new, and they're instead of like instead of say buying something new and then and then like just keeping it forever, they're getting rid of it, if you know what I mean. They're selling it again and then buying something else. So they're keeping it moving, which is quite nice. And they're constantly refreshing their wardrobe.
Do you get people trading stuff in that they've bought, bringing stuff in?
Yeah, all the time. Like we've said hello again to some old friends. Recently, I was in Japan in December, and we walked into this second-hand shop. It's mainly modern second-hand stuff, and it was full of gear. And I was like, I plucked out. Well, actually, my friend found it. He goes, "Oh, there's a Grenfell over there on the rail." My friend Fred from France. So I plucked it out, and I just had this weird feeling. I was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I've owned this before," and I looked at it, and I said to Fred, I went, "This was mine. I sold it to Japan probably 5-6 years ago for decent money. I think like 300 quid." And he goes, "How do you know it's yours?" I said, "Well, because the belt was missing. It's a massive size, and it had an ink spot there." Yeah. And he just looked at me and went, "And you buy it again?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it was in there for like 40 quid. But like, it shows you how much of a small world it is. Yeah. How like even the other side of the world, there's stuff out there that you've had, and that's a testament to good quality items. That's a British jacket that was made in the 60s. That's been worn throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, found by me, all them years later. It's been sold to someone else, it's come back, I'm going to sell it again. It's like, and it still looks great, it's still usable, the fabric's amazing. There's no reason why it's not going to live for another 50, 60 years.
One of our main aims with making clothes and the kind of ambition for them is that they are eventually going to end up in vintage shops. If they really stand that test of time in quality of construction, quality of materials, and crucially, good design, good sense of style. That's really what we're after.